Welcome to the behind-the-scenes look of Intrepid Lament. Lament? You know, I always had this way of pronouncing it in my head that I can never figure out how to say. Regardless, we're going to be going over how the song came around and all the behind-the-scenes look of it. We're going to start by going over the song itself, and then we'll transition to the 3D scene afterwards. So, I guess we'll start from the top down, as that's kind of how I arrange the documents from when I start writing them. So I guess, yeah, with that at the start, we got the piano melodies up first. I unfortunately have the plugin broken at the moment, so I'm in the preview of how it sounds. So we got this nice little piano ballad that kind of plays at the start and the end of the song. This was actually the starting point for the entire song, and everything else was kind of built upon this original foundation, I guess you could say. So how did I write this melody? Well, technically I didn't. What was it? I don't remember what was going through my head at the time when I first did this. I think the song I first wrote back in... Actually, I think I could probably check. One moment. But no, when I first started writing the song earlier, I don't know what was going through my head when I did it, but I just suddenly decided to just press record and I just improvised the piano melody that's currently within the song. I don't know. I just picked a key and then I just improvised over top of it. Sorry, where did I save the old version of this? There it is. So according to this, I started writing this not December, hang on, January 23rd last year, or at least that's when it was last modified. January 22nd is when I started writing the song, okay. So cool, we got that. Random bit of knowledge now. January 1st, 2020, or January 22nd, 2022, for the record. So yeah, no, the piano melody, I just completely improvised on the spot, and I don't know if I turned on the click for it or not, but I somehow managed to just stay on the beat pretty decently. How do I zoom in on this again? And there is quantization here, actually a bit more than I remembered, but I left notes kind of just off the beats and kind of on the on beats to kind of have a more natural feel to the song as I went through. And honestly, most of the quantization here was just to kind of make the performance sound a little cleaner. But a lot of it was actually pretty on time. Most of the cleanup was just to remove extra notes that I fat fingered or something when I was playing. And actually, so I'm gonna get used to hearing that a lot today. Both the intro and the outro melodies are actually part of the same, well, improv session. All I did was I decided, you know what? This stands on its own. Or the first half stands on its own, the back half stands on its own. Let me just cut it in half and put the second half at the end of the song. And then I just duplicated the original melody, and then I just changed a few notes here and there so it isn't one-to-one. I think, yeah, so this here I think is the original outro. I can't play it, unfortunately, again, since the plugin's broken, but... No, so that's kind of how that came around. It was just, I improvised it, I cleaned up the performance a little bit, and I shipped it, pretty much. Cutting it in half, putting the second half at the end. The end part, I think I did clean up, or I did a lot more to clean it up. And just make it work a bit more. I don't remember. Again, though, generally it's the same performance, at least. Anyways, though, so yeah, that's kind of how the piano melody came around. And then the chords are just there to add depth to it. Just a nice, soft string pad. But then we get to this instrument. I like to call this I guess the raindrop effect kind of thing. What I'll do is I'll take an arpeggio and apply a delay on it. I'll tune it to a certain amount, and you kind of lose track of what direction the arpeggio is going. So here it's going downwards. But you can hear it when it transitions, but as it's playing, it kind of just turns into this wall of notes, which is kind of why I call it the rainfall effect, because it just sounds like a wall with the gaps. Kind of like rain, I guess. Rain is like a wall of water. There's holes in the water. If it makes sense of that. Anyways, so yeah, that, I just say, I pulled that from a song or another song I was working on for a friend. And I thought the effect sounded good. I thought it would sound good there, and I think it does. Before we move away from the intro, the string section here at the start was actually a very late addition to the song. Probably one of the last things I did before I called the song done. It'd be helpful if it wasn't muted. I'm realizing that's very quiet for you guys. Listen to the first 5 seconds, I guess apparently the first 16 seconds of the song. So the string section here, I don't remember how I came around with it. I just knew that starting abruptly was a little too fast. Yeah, I felt like that was a little too abrupt, so I decided I should put something softer at the start. And I had the strings already there, so I figured, why not use them a little bit more? But the melody itself, I don't remember how it initially came around. I think I just drew in the notes without much thought or care. Maybe I improvised it. I can't remember. But I decided to do it in a separate key from the rest of the song, which I think the song is in F minor, if I'm not mistaken. Pretty sure that's the key. But I decided to do this one just off the cuff, just some different key, just to have a bit of a different feel for it. And I think, yeah, it looks like it's C major or something right now, but it doesn't matter what it is. What was unintentional, though, was making it sound like something straight from the Halo soundtrack. Which, yeah, I mean, if we just listen to the louder version here, not that version. It very much sounds like a melody that you would hear from the Halo soundtrack, which actually before starting this recording, I found one of the tracks that it might sound familiar with. It's the track in Pen from the Halo 2 soundtrack. Just let's listen to the start for a moment. You can kind of hear the similarities there. I'm pretty sure there's another track where it sounds more similar to, but I couldn't find it. But again, that was not intentional. I did not try to write it to sound like, or to try and copy from the Halo soundtrack. That's just kind of how it happened to sound like. Regardless, though, so yeah, that's kind of just the intro. So as we keep working down, I guess we got drums next. Drums were an interesting problem for me to overcome. So I used the typical drum patch that I've used, kind of copy-paste on a lot of songs at this point. I'm trying to get away from that, but I can't help it. I got a good, or I modified this patch to be just to my liking. Regardless, though, I don't know what I'm listening for there. Hang on. So one thing in particular that I want to point out were the toms. I thought there were toms here. Or is this not a part with toms? Did I just remove them completely from this track? Yeah, I did. Okay. No, so the original tom patch was the biggest problem I had when I first wrote the song, which I should still be here. Apparently not. What? I don't know why those aren't working. I could access them down here, though. These should work. Yeah. So these were the initial toms that were actually present within the song. But I always found them to just they didn't fit the aesthetic I was going for, which is more like synth wavy. So you got those doom doom toms instead of that, which just sounds flat and boring. So recently I actually got Addictive Drums. I've just got the bass kit for it though, but I went ahead and swapped those toms in, and they're much closer to what I was looking for. Still not quite there, but that's close enough for me to be content with. Maybe this one's a better example of the tom hits. I mean, I guess I could always just open the session, but yeah, there's a lot more twang to those hits. Not as much as I would have liked, but much more that I was happy with it. Actually, now my problem with the toms is I kind of wish I redid the pattern or some of the patterns for the toms, but yeah, that's whatever. Then another problem I had, so I did a couple different mixes of the song, and the last one I did before doing this edition, I just realized the hi-hats kind of drive me up the wall crazy. I don't like them. So I actually duplicated the hi-hats, and now I harmonize them. Using the hi-hats from Addictive Drums combined with these original ones. Honestly, it might sound better if I do the demonstration here. We'll see. I don't know why. I mean, that to you guys probably just sounds boring, but the point is, the reason I layered these hi-hats is if I solo just the original ones, which are still obviously in the song. Oop. That sounds very boring. It's just da 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 with zero variation. But then I bring in the new hi-hats. Oh, wait, no, hang on. That's soloing both of them. Here's just the original. Yeah, doesn't that just sound suckish? So yeah, I brought in the Addictive Drums hi-hats, since they actually, it's not the exact same sample. There's various samples that it just samples or cycles between. And you can kind of hear on each of those individual hits, there is variation between them. In whether it's in velocity or tone, when you combine the two together, it just creates a different sound. A more dynamic one than just a static the same hi-hat sample, just with different velocities. So I decided to do that to just add more variation to the hi-hat, and I feel like that brings a lot more life to the song. Continuing down, is there anything else here in particular? So bass, I mean, I just used pretty much the slightly modified version of this patch. I just love it so much. I guess, I don't know, I didn't... I honestly have nothing to talk about with that. I just wanted to hear that again. I love that patch so much. I mean, I guess going over the structure of the song. All right, here, let's just keep going through here. So all right, so there were two different chords that I used throughout the song, I guess. I just go into the chorus so I can kind of talk through this a bit. So you've got these chords, which are just kind of stabs of the same thing, just da 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 da. Whereas this other chord is... it's playing the exact same chord, but with a slightly different tone, and it just sustains the note for the entire time. I have these working in conjunction to kind of create a different texture. They just kind of work together in a unique way that I love the aesthetic of. Because you get the sustain of a typical chord, but you get a bit more depth with the continuous hits, and that continues throughout the song. It's not exclusive to the chorus. Anyways, this song, alright, so one of the other songs I did, it's at the time of recording this, it's not actually publicly released, But Data Run, whenever that does come out, a lot of this song structure and ideas are almost mirrored from that song Data Run, including a lot of the instruments that I used, including the drums, including the chords, including this lead. And I've realized I love these sine wave leads. I love them so much for some reason. I don't know, they resonate within me, and I had to use them again. Which then also, unrelated note, but this song structure, being a copy from Data Run's song structure, was also used for the song structure for the one of the projects I did in school. I don't know if I'm going to release that song. It's currently up on or at the time of recording this, it's up on my SoundCloud under some... What the heck did I even call it? I don't know. It's in the RAC collection on there, regardless. But just, for all three of those songs, pretty much use the same general structure as their bass. Also, they all have different takes of it, but it worked, I guess, for that stuff. Anyways, yeah, so I love sine leads. Then I decided to do a wub bass here. Why is there a wub off and on? Hang on, I'm actually curious about this. I'm assuming one is on beat and off beat. I can't tell at the moment. Yeah, so that's controlling the wub, and you can see that it's inverted between the two synths, so... Interesting. I completely forgot I did that. This is part of the fun thing about this. I get to relearn all of this stuff. Continuing onwards, so... What is this? What? Huh? Oh, that's the wispy sounds. Okay, I actually forgot. Yeah, I decided this is kind of when I started to go into that phase of, you know what, I should add sound effects to my songs to just add more dynamics to them. And yeah, there's this. I believe when I went into the mixing portion of it, I kind of faded those in and out at different volumes. Okay, not as much as I thought I did, but just to add more texture. I never really carried it onwards through the rest of the song. It was just more of some ear candy for the start, I guess. Then there was this other effect I did once we got to the breakdown. Oh, those chords are gorgeous. I have nothing to talk about them. That's just kind of something else I did. Now here is something that was probably the last change I did before shipping the song, I guess. The outro, or the extra synth during the outro. You might hear that and you'll realize, wait, that's not how it sounds in the song. You would be correct. That is the old version. Actually, my problem with that is something about the way it resonates in my ear. I didn't really like it, so I wanted to change it. But yeah, I took a listen to it and I thought, okay, what do I like about it? It's obviously using a saw wave, but what if I transition it to be more of a super saw? So this is, I think, one of the only patches where I actually wasn't a preset in the song, unfortunately, but I decided to just redo the patch completely. Yeah, I mean, it's just a very simple super saw type patch with a bit of a square wave for a little extra low end depth. But I believe I did some stuff to alter it here to make it sound closer to the original, but there's actually something interesting about this sound that I'll go quickly touch on while I'm thinking about it. What is it? It's lead 3, I think. No, it's great name. Lead synth 2v2. Hang on, I think this is the original as well. Yeah. It does sound a lot better in the Pro Tools session, since here it's actually running, or I have some parallel processing running it through a channel over here I called amp. Lead to amp, I guess? Yeah. Basically using the Sans amp thing here, I wanted to just tweak the sound a bit to make it sound a little more dirty, I guess. Which I also have this running through as well. It just adds a little bit more thickness to the sound. It's something that's a little more unique. I like that a lot. And I think that's probably about it from the Reason session. I do believe so. Am I missing anything in my notes? Yeah. Oh yeah, one thing I guess I forgot to mention. We've pretty much touched on all the drums. So, when I went in to do that for the synth, the other last thing I did was adding the sub to the piano at the start. If we just listen to that here. So there's a lot of this low end here. That's actually very quiet, I'm realizing, but... yeah, all of that low end was, again, pretty much a last minute decision. Here's how it originally sounded before I brought that in. Could that be any more boring? So yeah, basically all I did for this was I think I just put a sine wave. Yeah, it's just a sine wave that's an octave down, and then I just modulated the volume. It just follows the root note of what the piano is playing. Yeah, I just felt like there was no low end. I tried to do some subharmonic synthesis, but it didn't work out, let's phrase it that way, so I just did this, and it worked out significantly better than I could have expected. When in doubt, just add a sine wave. Anyways, though, yeah, I think that's it for at least the Reason session. Is there anything in Pro Tools, the mixing session, that I wanted to go over? I don't believe so. A lot of this mix went through a lot of iterations. Just trying to get the right balance for things. One of the hard things to balance was getting the aggressive, or this extra synth at the end. And what I kind of realized so what was the problem I was having with it? The sound when it was more mono, kind of, if I have the original one here. I don't know, it just feels like it interferes with the other stuff. Yeah, I don't care how that was. It might have been left in, regardless. But I decided to just go overboard with the reverb on it, combined with the fact that it's panned hard left and right, so we got full stereo width. Also, I think I did some extra stereo. Yeah, I made it even wider as well. So all of that combined, it feels a lot bigger, and it kind of blends in a lot better with the other sounds. It doesn't feel as forced anymore, I guess. I don't believe there's much else I want to touch on in terms of the mix, as far as I can recall. Alright, let's go ahead and pivot over to 3D. Alright, now we are over in 3ds Max, where I did all of the animation and modeling for this video. Alright, so first here we are looking at the first scene of the video, scene 1, I guess. So the video is broken down into 3 scenes, scene 1, 2, and 3. Scene 1 and 3 are the ones with the balls, and 2 is the one in the big room. We'll go over those ones when we get to them. So first off, scene 1 and 3 are basically the same, so what I say here will be applicable to the other one. There are differences, which we'll go over when the time comes. So how do we do these scenes, first off? Well, this here is what the camera sees, which is what you guys see in the video. This here is what everything else looks like. What are we looking at here? Excuse me. First off, well, what are these cones at the top and the bottom? They actually don't appear in the render at all, even if I tried. I have them turned off in the render because they were actually appearing in the reflections on the bubbles as they were floating up. I kind of call them bubbles because they're not perfectly spherical. which is by design. They also their shapes technically morph as well, so there's that. You can't tell in the video, but the shapes morph. So how exactly does it go from this to what you see? Well, if we inch forward just one frame, yeah, physics breaks. So when I rendered this scene, I had like, I don't know, 300. Hang on, what's the highest count of spheres I have? So there were probably about 400 of these bubbles down in here at one point, and I've deleted probably 200 of them or something now, but basically, these were all stacked down here. I had them all set to be, I believe it's, yeah, Mass Effect's rigid bodies, and I decided to put some gravity modifiers, and I forgot, well, at first, I forgot to remove the invisible plane at 0, which 0, for the record, is this tiny grid that you can barely see in the middle here. So everything below here, as soon as you run the physics simulation, they all get forced up above that grid. Which is why it kind of looks broken spontaneously. But the reason why I kept it is because it actually did the job that I needed it to do, apparently. So in the animation, all of the balls come floating up out of the scene. Can I do something about that choppy playback? I think I can. So it's the phase here. This is what does the modulation for these things as they change shape. I think if I come over to the end here and I just quickly auto key that to 0, that should fix that end. I have a relatively normal playback. Alright, nope, because things broke as well when I was keying this up. So we're just going to have to deal with the choppy frame rate. Yay, whatever. So, yeah, basically the balls all get catapulted up, and because of the physics, they just start bouncing around like crazy in there and start slowly ejecting. At this point, the gravity is pushing them up. And you'll notice that there's this cylinder that's just going in here. I call it a stir rod. It just pushes everything around so they don't get stuck and clumped up. It just kind of goes in circles, pushing them around and whatnot. It was a lot of work trying to get the volume of these flowing out at the rate that the song was kind of playing at. But I kind of got there in the end. It looks good enough. I actually used a similar concept to all of this than when I did some physics thing a few years back, where it was like a ball sorter. There's maybe a video of it on my YouTube channel, I don't know. But basically, there's like a thing at the top, a bunch of colored balls fall down and they get automatically sorted. It was just something to experiment with. But I basically used the same principle here, except in inverse. Basically what I did is I did the simulation and then I removed the stuff I didn't want after the fact. Which is why there are so many missing balls. But yeah, after the song hits the 1 point, the gravity inverses, it goes from pushing upwards like 1.52 G to almost pulling downwards like 150 G. So yeah, they all just suddenly fall out of the sky, which is kind of how that happens. Anyways, there's that. And yeah, all of these here are different lights. This is the main blue light on the scene. Then down here's the pink light. Back here, I decided to just have a bit of a fill light for the things that are mostly falling in the backgrounds at the end, but it's just an extra spotlight for that. And yeah, up here, the blue one is also another stir rod. As you saw it moving back here once they all started falling. Just so that way they don't fall straight down, they all kind of spread out around the place. Yay. So yeah, that's kind of how the first scene works. I simulated everything, I baked the frames, which is why I'm able to scrub through all of this, otherwise it wouldn't work like that, but yeah, it was fun. I'll just go to scene 3 first, and then, because there's a lot more to talk about with scene 2. So another thing that happened partway through this. So scene 1 was the first one I rendered, which is also why it looks so different compared to the other scenes. If I just open up one of the frames here, for example, it looks like these bubbles, they just look very soft, kind of. They're not very harsh. But if I go to scene 3, on the other hand, and I scroll down, just select a frame. I mean, they look soft, but they're also a bit sharper. The reflections are a lot sharper. There's more detail in them. Well, that's because in between rendering scene 1 and scene 3, which was the order I was rendering in, scene 1, 3, 2, I switched the render engine that I was using. Not something you want to do mid-project, but it's why scene 2 looks as good as it does. We'll get to that when we get to it. But no, what was it? I decided to switch from Arnold, which is built into 3ds Max now, to V-Ray. I decided to pick up a license for that, since Arnold is not GPU optimized, and I was having a lot of issues with rendering with Arnold on scene 2 in particular, which is why I was looking for an alternative. And I decided to use scene 3 as the test bed, since it's also the shortest scene at like 982 frames or something like that. And that's also part of the reason why I never went back to re-render scene 1 using V-Ray, because it's just, I don't want to render another 2,000 frames. That's just another day or two gone. But, I mean, the important thing is the end results look significantly better. Regardless, though. So scene 3, again, basically mirrors scene 1. I'm seeing if I can do this here quickly, because I don't think I broke the phase on this one. So if I auto key this to 0. Yep, there we go. So yeah, that one's not broken. So we can scrub through properly. And you might notice when I'm scrubbing through, you can hear the audio playing. That's because I was actually using the audio to sync all of this too. As if I pull up in the curve editor here, you can actually see the waveform. See the waveform. There we go. Takes a minute sometimes. But yeah, use that for syncing everything up. This one, you'll notice, is definitely a bit different because, well, there's no massive cone at the bottom. Well, okay, let's see if I can remember how I did this. This was the last scene I did as well. But, oh, no, the cone is there. I just have it hidden in the viewport. Ah, look, there it is. Magic. No, so yeah, these all just get funneled up through the thing, but unlike the other one, I just have the gravity force everything up immediately. How loud is that to you guys? Because I don't... The audio is not the focus here. So yeah, basically the gravity forces everything up at like 20 or... No, I think it's like 75 G. Which again, 1 G is a planet on Earth. If you don't remember. Anyways, so yeah, everything is getting forced up at 75 G or something like that. And then at like frame 62 or 63, I inverse the gravity to be negative G. So everything's just carrying momentum forward, and I just let everything just bounce around and collide with each other for the rest of the scene, and that's kind of just lets everything fall the way it does. I did redo the shape of the bottom cone to allow for a higher flow rate. And the top one, I think I reshaped as well, so they're more projected downwards rather than outwards. Because on scene 1, the cone up here is a bit, what is it? It looks more like this, pretty much. Or it's flatter and it's wider. So yeah, I altered that a bit to allow for different collision. And yeah, everything else is more or less the same. The lights do flicker, if you notice in the animation, around this point in the song. That's just because all of these are going past this, or the light, and that's casting a shadow, so it just blocks out the light for a minute. I just left it in because it would have been too much work to have altered it. For just those few frames, but anyways. So yeah, scene 1 and scene 3 are pretty much the same. Also, I guess one thing I did differently is I pulled everything above the 0 plane. So there's no massive explosion suddenly. Anyways, so that's scene 1 and 3. Now let's talk scene 2, which is the big one. Let's go ahead and go to it. Where is it? Here's the start of scene 2. Now, you might be wondering, what the fuck are you looking at? Yeah, so this was the original mock-up for scene 2. It was going to be basically this camera just going through a pipe network. That was the original concept. Obviously, that didn't stick around. And for the best, because I'd still probably be working on this scene to this day, even though I spent 10 days rendering the animation. So yeah, the idea was going to be, I was going to have this pipe network that the camera was just going to flow through, and I was going to have all the lights flickering in sync with music. Something like that. And then once it gets to the breakdown, it was going to come to a giant opening room, kind of like what is currently the current scene 2. But yeah, difficulties later, things happened. And one of the big problems I was having was render efficiency. Every time I tried to render a demo of this frame, just a demo frame, things would try to crash on me. I don't have the demo frame on standby. Actually, let me go grab one. So this here is a low quality demo frame of what the scene was going to look like, or the inside of this pipe system was going to look like. It looks pretty nice, minus the fact that it's noisy, since again, this was a production render. It's not the high quality things that would have come out afterwards. The reason why I didn't go through with it, this frame probably took like 5 minutes to render. Or something, and my computer, or the program, was crashing the entire time. Now, I'm pretty sure right now, if I were to switch this over from Arnold, which this was also using Arnold, I'm pretty sure if I switched this from Arnold to V-Ray, it would look significant. And I mean, actually, you know what? Let's go and experiment with this. I'm going to pause the recording again. I'm going to do a demo render if this was in V-Ray, and we're going to see how that looks. All right, and we are back. I have gone and done the modifications. And this here is what the render result was after 30 seconds of rendering. So what we're looking at here, I mean, obviously it's still not perfect because I just cut the render short fast. But I mean, when you compare it to that, it's significantly less noisy. The bump map or the displacement map is significantly higher quality. And this was done with 0 problems whatsoever. Obviously, the camera angle is not the same because I didn't place a camera down. It was the viewport. And there's so much more detail on these pipes that are running as well. Yeah, this would have looked significantly better. Anyways, though, but that's an alternate history. Yeah. So the reason why it doesn't look the exact same is because there are 2 lights in this scene, whereas this one I only put 1 extra light down. I have to use special lights for V-Ray. The Arnold ones don't work. That's basically the problem. So yeah, that's how this would have looked if I switched to V-Ray, and it looked so good, and it rendered so fast. Anyways, though, enough about the scene that never made it to be. Let's go ahead and take a look at the scene that was. Where is that? So yeah, as I kind of mentioned, every scene that I was transitioning from Arnold to V-Ray, I had to completely redo. I had to redo all the textures. I had to redo all the lights. And yeah, so in here we've got the scene that ended up being used. Let's see here. So let's try and go from top to bottom in order. In terms of the geometry, I don't know. It's just what I did. The best way I can describe it is just, honestly, I don't know how I describe it. It's just, this is what I made. I started with like a cylinder here. I flared the base, and then I just extruded it a whole bunch. I took the thing, and then I just inverted it. Spun it 90 degrees, and called that a day. I thought I spun it 90 degrees. Huh. Apparently I didn't. Wow, okay, I'm just noticing this now. Fuck. Okay, well, I'm not redoing the render. That took 8 days to render this scene. Great. When I get my render farm, I'm redoing that. No, these were not. These are supposed to be 90 degrees apart. I don't know how I ended up. I am thoroughly disappointed with myself for not catching that until right now. How did I not do? Whatever. Anyways, moving on. Yeah, no. So, kind of, the visualizer I was kind of using as reference was, what's the song called again? I don't know. That just kind of, I wanted to have the camera on a track that just goes in a circle around the thing while the room kind of just dynamically changes. Yeah, I started with that, and then I kind of just kept building things out, deciding things. Everything being hexagonal or octagonal, whatever it is, everything being flat-faced was an intentional design. I didn't want things to be perfectly round. Yeah, so we've got the lights up in the corners here that kind of just are pot lights, I guess. Just to add more flair to the room. The spotlights, I actually used a similar design and everything that I did for the one project I did in the third semester when I was in RAC. When I was syncing lights to music. I obviously have since improved the way that I animate that, because when I did that project, I had to animate the... I had to pretty much animate this axis. Obviously, it was animating from the base, which actually I don't know why that's not motioning from there, actually. No, that is spot one. Okay. Oh, the point is, it was pivoting from the base, but basically I had to pivot it like this, and then I could rotate it like that afterwards. I couldn't do one and then or no, sorry, it wasn't that way. Because I had to have them this way, so I did all the rotations, and then I did all the pivoting. And that's why that animation kind of turned out so jank. Whereas here, you know what? I improved the design, so I was able to do both axes at the same time, allowing for a more dynamic animation. Until you get to... once you see this, you're not going to unsee it. But at some point, these lights, they just flip backwards. That is not by design. That was an accident. I do know why it happened. I couldn't be bothered fixing it. That's not on purpose. It happens. Anyway, so yeah, those are the only lights that are really animated. The light down here, it just flickers because these things just go past the light. That was by design. I wanted that to happen as a thing. So what the heck is going on in the middle here? Let's ask that. Frankly, I don't know. It's just, I wanted it to be industrial, sort of. That was about it. So I call these cogs. I mean, obviously they're more like nuts, but whatever. Yeah, so they're perfectly in sync with the beat, and they just keep cycling over and over again for the entire length. So why do they do that? I don't know. I basically decided, so they go down on the kick, and then they spin on the snare. But to have them be in sync like that, now we start to get into the stuff that drove me insane. Okay, I have to go to the dope sheet. Hang on. Where is it? Here we go. That doesn't look right. Oh, that's because I think I have other things selected. Where are they? Cogs. Here we go. Right? Is it gonna... It's not gonna... Okay. If I select one in particular rather than the whole group. No, the group's not closed. Hang on, I want to figure this out. What? So that's the cogs as a group. Just making sure. Here, select. The group is closed. There we go, I hope. So I'm looking for just cog underscore something here. I'm not seeing it. Alright, well, anyways, then, I guess it's just not wanting to cooperate. Or, no, it's because it's in the curve sheet, not the dope sheet. That's the problem. Here we go. So this here is how the cogs are animated. Oh boy, that's a lot of keyframes. So I went through a lot of different iterations when I was animating these things to move like this. The initial idea was there were 6 of these things that just kept, once it reached the bottom, it would just instantaneously warp back up to the top and then go down again. When I did that, there they were all gapped or spaced properly apart from each other, except there was one gap that was very large. I was willing to put up with that, but the issue was with all of these just fell out of sync with this song. So I had to keep resyncing each one independently, and that just got unbelievably tedious, so I gave up on it. So I tried a new idea where it was just stack all of these things and then just move or adjust the keyframes so they are in a better position, but I gave up on that because, again, they were falling out of sync with each other this time, not the song. Which, I mean, I guess if they're falling out of sync with each other, they're falling out of sync with the song. So never mind that. So the solution I came up with, which is arguably the worst one, is I did this monstrosity. I had to hand do every single keyframe the whole length of the song. Every time it goes down, I had to redo it. Thankfully, for the rotations, though, if we come down to that, yeah, I just had to do it once and then copy paste. That one was actually pretty easy. I mean, I did have to manually sync each of these, but again, that was relatively easy by comparison. And you'll notice that it doesn't rotate infinitely down like the other one. Here, it rotates, and then on the next frame, if I can navigate this here, so it moves down, they rotate, and then it reaches the next key point, and then on the next frame, it just immediately rotates back to where it was, or to how it started. So it just keeps rotating infinitely between the same 2 points. You can't tell in the animation that that's what's happening. If it looks like that at all, it's just because of how the lighting is interacting from the bottom. That was a little weird, so... Anyways. So yeah, basically, you might be looking at this now and saying, well, so if this keeps going down and down and down, how do these keep coming out? That's when we get to the fun part. They just do. There's over 100 of these things that just keep descending. This was the laziest option to make this work, but unfortunately, it was the only one that was time efficient. I mean, it works. Technically, there's no way of really knowing in the animation that this is what's happening. Even though, obviously, it's supposed to look like this is what's happening. The idea when I was animating it was, it's just supposed to look like it. It's not supposed to do it. But it's how it turned out anyways. I'm looking at how long this has been going for now, and I should try and wrap up soon. Anyways, though, so I had to redo that multiple times to make that turn out the way it did. Looking at it, the finished product, the nuts are very dull and barely visible, but it's whatever. And then there's the column here that continuously moves as well. This was, again, a kind of a last-minute decision that came around. Originally, the pillar in the middle wasn't going to have any color on it, but then I decided, you know what, I'll do color. What if I animate the color? What if I have it going down as well? So yeah, that I decided to do, which... how did I do that? I don't know. I think I basically just put the texture onto the thing. I did some bump map, which you can see a couple times on some frames in the animation. Each of these points of light do actually emit shadows from the light in the bottom, which is pretty cool, actually, I think. It's not needed, but I think it's cool nevertheless. And then, yeah, so then I just have it set to be a UV map, and it just continuously pulls the texture down infinitely, which is how it moves. So the tube itself doesn't move, it's just the texture that moves, which is pretty nice. And, yeah, I think that's about all I have to say on this. Oh, right, I was going to show the before and after. So as I kind of mentioned, so this here is what the V-Ray, or a demo frame looked like for the V-Ray when I was still fixing the lighting. But, I mean, it looks pretty decent. You can see depth on all of these structures and whatnot. But then, this is how this exact frame looks like using the Arnold renderer before I made the switch. Yeah, it looks a bit different. So this frame here was a finished frame of the animation before I decided to switch render engines. And it just looks so bad by comparison. I mean, it looks decent, but it doesn't This looks so much better. I mean, like, when you look at the structure down here, I had to remove the displacement map from this structure because it would crash 3ds Max whenever I tried to render it, because again, I was using my GPU to render a CPU optimized render engine. Whereas this one is GPU optimized with CPU capability, and this is how this all turned out as well, or then as a result. There's so much more depth. These structures, they just don't look like flat with stretched textures. They actually look like metal beams with different depths. Just ignore the bit in the middle here that I could not fix, so that gets to live in the finished animation, unfortunately. But yeah, the scene as a whole looks significantly better. It did take an extra 2 days to render. 2 days minimum to render to make the scene look like that, but it was definitely worth it. So worth it. Anyways, though, is there anything else I needed to touch on? So I've talked about the transition to the new render animation, the old scene. No, I think that's about it. Yeah, I think that's kind of it for the behind the scenes of how this all turned out. I'm trying to think last minute if there's anything else, but I don't believe so. No, so that's kind of how all this went. I guess talking render times, Scene 1, using the Arnold renderer, as I mentioned, it took about, I think this took 18, 19 hours to render or something. It wasn't too bad. I mean, for 2,000 frames, that was actually fantastic. It was I think the longest frame took 50 seconds, but on average they took 20 to 30 frames. Scene 3 with the transition, it took, I think, about the same amount of time, even though there's only 900 frames. Oh, 982, I was right. But the visual fidelity is definitely much better. I should have kept the two scenes the same, probably, but I'm content having them be different. And then Scene 2, this monstrosity, yeah. I started, what day is it right now? Today's the 29th. I started rendering, or this finished rendering last night on the 28th. I started rendering this scene on the 21st. Originally, all 3 scenes combined were projected to take 6 to 8 days to render. Scene 2 alone took 6 to 8 days to render. Yeah, it took almost 8, little, or 7.5, I guess, technically. And yeah, the first 40 frames were rendered using both the CPU and, at this point, I'm just saying things for my own logs, so I remember this stuff. But yeah, up to scene 41, I think, was rendered using both the GPU and the CPU. But because my computer kept shutting off during the renders, I think it was overloading the power supply unit. I'm not 100% certain. But it did keep shutting off my computer, so I did end up having to switch to just the GPU. And that did add to the render times to compensate for the lower quality that was being rendered now. Because yeah, the first few frames, they were locked, so they couldn't take more than 1:30. But once the quality dropped after I switched to just the GPU, so I upped it to 1:40 to kind of make up for that a bit. I don't know. In the future, I would love to re-render this animation at a higher resolution with higher fidelity, higher windows, but unfortunately, because of tech limitations right now, I couldn't do that. If I could get a second or third GPU, possibly I'll redo the animation, but yeah. Because all I have to do is just change the settings and click render and it's good to go, but I don't know, that's something for another year, I guess. Anyways, yeah, so that's kind of the behind the scenes look of Intrepid Lament and everything that kind of went into it. I hope you guys enjoyed, and we'll see how the next animation goes for the next song whenever that happens. Thank you for listening to my incessant ramblings for the past hour.